The wind moved slowly across the dry plains, carrying with it the scent of dust and the hum of cicadas. It was one of those late summer afternoons in the American Midwest when time seemed to stretch, when the land felt endless and alive, yet silent in its heat. Out on a modest farm, surrounded by faded fences and golden weeds, a man named Jake Turner wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned against a post. It had been another long day repairing fences, feeding livestock, and keeping the rhythm of life steady, as all farmers must. Near the far edge of the pasture, a gray donkey grazed lazily, her ears flicking back and forth like tiny radar dishes. Her name was Rosie, and though she looked ordinary, a bit stubborn, a bit rough around the edges, Jake swore she was the heart of his farm. He'd rescued her 3 years ago from a livestock auction, where she stood apart from the others, quiet but proud. The moment Jake saw her eyes, steady, amber, and unafraid, he knew she was special. Since then, Rosie had been more than just another animal. She was a guardian. When coyotes prowled too close, she was the first to bray. When storms rolled in, she led the sheep toward shelter. Jake often said, "She's got a soul that understands this land." That day, the air was heavy and strange. Even the chickens behind the barn had gone still, their usual chatter fading into uneasy silence. Jake straightened up, the fine hairs on his neck rising. From across the field came a sound, low, harsh, and quick. It wasn't the wind. He squinted toward the horizon. At first, there was only the shimmer of heat. But then, through the tall grass, shadows began to move. 6, maybe 7 of them, sleek and coordinated. Their shapes were too fluid for coyotes. Jake's stomach tightened. Wild dogs. Around here, that word carried weight. Packs of half-feral dogs, descendants of strays, had been known to hunt livestock when food was scarce. They weren't shy, and they weren't afraid of much. Rosie noticed them before Jake could act. Her head shot up, ears standing tall. She froze, then slowly turned to face the movement in the grass. A soft snort left her nostrils. The pack fanned out, circling her like a ripple spreading across still water. The leader, a scarred, brindled male, crept forward, his yellow eyes locked on Rosie's flank. Behind him, the others began to spread wider, quiet as ghosts. From the porch, Jake's wife, Maddie, called out, "Jake, you all right?" He didn't answer. His heart was already racing. He grabbed the air horn hanging from a nail by the shed, the one he used for scaring off predators, and slung a coiled rope over his shoulder. He could hear his son, little Eli, behind him, asking what was wrong, but he only said one thing, "Stay inside with your mama." Then he ran. Out in the field, Rosie was no longer grazing. Her stance had changed. Head lowered, body square, hooves planted like stone. The wild dogs crept closer. One growled, another barked sharply, testing her resolve. Rosie let out a deep, guttural bray that rolled across the plain like thunder. The leader flinched, but didn't back down. He was hungry. When Jake reached the gate, he could see the circle had tightened. The dogs were no more than 15 feet from Rosie now. The air horn was clutched in his hand, but he hesitated. If he startled them too soon, they might rush her all at once. Rosie stamped her front hoof into the dirt, a cloud of dust swirling around her legs. The leader lunged. The motion was sudden, a blur of gray muscle and teeth, but Rosie was faster. She spun, her back legs coiling, and then crack, her hooves struck with bone-breaking force. The dog yelped, thrown sideways, tumbling into the dust. The others hesitated, snarling but uncertain. That moment of hesitation was all Jake needed. He blasted the air horn, a shattering metallic scream that tore through the heat. The dogs froze, ears flattened. Jake vaulted the fence, landing hard, and sprinted toward them, shouting and waving his rope. "Go on! Get out of here!" he roared, his voice echoing over the land. Two dogs bolted immediately, tails tucked. Another turned and snapped its teeth in defiance, but Jake didn't slow. He charged, swinging the rope in wide arcs, kicking up dirt and shouting until the pack began to scatter. But the leader, limping though he was, refused to go quietly. He turned back toward Rosie, foam at his mouth, and lunged one last time. Jake barely had time to react before Rosie met him head-on. She reared back, then slammed both front hooves down with terrifying precision. The blow landed against the dog's chest with a dull, heavy thud. The animal yelped once, then silence. The rest of the pack vanished into the weeds, swallowed by the trembling grass. Jake stopped, chest heaving, dust clinging to his sweat-soaked shirt. He dropped the rope and ran to Rosie. Her sides heaved, her nostrils flared, and a dark streak of blood ran down her left leg. "Easy, girl," he whispered, placing a hand on her neck. Her skin was hot under his palm, trembling but alive. Rosie turned her head, eyes meeting his for just a moment. There was something there, something steady and wild and proud. Behind them, Maddie and Eli were running across the field. Maddie's hand covered her mouth when she saw the smear of red on Rosie's flank. Eli clutched at Jake's leg. "Did she get hurt, Dad?" Jake nodded softly. "A little, but she's gonna be fine. She's tougher than any of us." He led Rosie back toward the barn, his arm around her neck as if she were an old friend instead of livestock. In the barn's shade, Maddie cleaned the wound, just a scrape, nothing deep, and pressed a cool cloth against it. Rosie stood still through it all, her big eyes calm and patient. That night, after the chores were done and Eli was asleep, Jake sat out on the porch with Maddie. The moon hung low, pale and wide, washing the fields in silver. In the distance, he could hear the soft tinkling of the bell around Rosie's neck. "She didn't run," he said quietly. "She stood her ground." Maddie smiled faintly, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "Maybe she learned that from you." Jake shook his head. "No," he said, staring out into the dark. "I think I learned it from her." The next morning, the story spread fast through the small farming community. Folks came by to see Rosie, the donkey who fought off a pack of wild dogs. Jake chuckled at the attention, but he could tell Rosie didn't care much for fame. She just wanted her breakfast and her patch of grass. Over the next few days, Jake reinforced the fences, added motion sensor lights along the north edge of the property, and even hung an old brass bell from a post near the field's center. "If trouble comes again," he said, "I want them to hear us coming." But the trouble didn't return. The wild dogs had moved on. The land grew quiet again. One afternoon, while Jake was fixing a gate, he heard another noise, a frightened bleating. One of the younger lambs had slipped into a patch of mud near the creek, its tiny legs flailing helplessly. Before Jake could drop his tools, Rosie was already trotting toward it. She didn't panic or rush. She simply lowered her head, nudging the lamb gently, guiding it to firmer ground. Then she stood over it, ears forward, as if making sure the little one understood it was safe now. Jake leaned against the fence, smiling. "She's got the heart of a guardian," he said softly. Later that evening, Eli brought out a small brush and began grooming Rosie's mane while humming quietly to himself. "Thank you, Rosie," he whispered, as though she could understand. Maybe she did, because she lowered her head and let out a slow, peaceful sigh. The bond between them deepened in ways words can't quite capture. Rosie had become more than a farm animal. She was family. Every night, when the sun bled into the horizon and the first stars blinked awake, her silhouette stood watch by the fence line, the little bell on her collar chiming gently with each shift of the wind. Months passed. The seasons changed. The land that once baked under relentless heat turned lush after autumn rains. Jake often caught himself thinking about that day. The roar of the air horn, the dust, the blur of motion, and that moment when Rosie faced the wild dogs without fear. It reminded him that courage doesn't always come from strength. It comes from loyalty, from love, from that instinct to protect what matters. One cool evening, Jake invited a few neighbors over. They sat around the porch, sharing stories as the crickets sang. Someone asked, "Jake, that donkey of yours, was it true she really fought off a whole pack?" Jake chuckled, glancing toward the pasture where Rosie grazed under the starlight. "Every word," he said. "She didn't think about running. She just stood between them and the farm. Like she knew it was her duty." The group fell quiet. The wind rustled the grass. And somewhere out there, Rosie lifted her head, the bell around her neck ringing softly, almost like an answer. When the neighbors left and the lanterns went out, Jake lingered alone on the porch. He tapped the old brass bell that hung near the post. Clang, a deep, warm sound that rolled through the still air. From across the field came a gentle chime in reply. Rosie was out there, keeping watch, as always. Jake smiled. "Good night, girl," he whispered. In the days that followed, he found himself thinking often about what Rosie had taught him. On a farm, life is simple but hard. You mend what breaks, you feed what hungers, and you protect what's yours. But courage, real courage, isn't in fighting storms or chasing off danger. It's in standing your ground when fear tells you to run. And Rosie, that stubborn gray donkey, understood that better than anyone. As winter drew near, the fields turned pale and quiet. One morning, after the first frost, Jake woke early to check on the animals. The sunrise burned red and gold through the cold mist. Out by the fence line, Rosie stood tall, her breath rising in soft clouds. Beyond her, a family of deer moved cautiously across the far field, their silhouettes framed by dawn. For a long moment, Jake just watched. The world felt still, almost sacred. Then Rosie turned her head toward him, ears twitching, as if to say, "All is well." And maybe in that fragile, beautiful quiet, it truly was. And that's the story of Rosie, the brave gray donkey who faced a pack of wild dogs and reminded one farmer what courage really means. On that quiet piece of land, the bond between man and animal became something extraordinary. A reminder that loyalty, love, and bravery can live even in the most ordinary hearts. If this story touched you, leave a comment, share it, and subscribe for more tales of life, courage, and the wild spirit that connects us all. Until next time, keep your heart open and keep listening to the quiet voices of the land.